This is the best of Dr. Jerome Corsi on the Truth Central.
This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. You can follow me on X at CorsiJerome1, and you can follow me on Substack, JeromeCorsiPhD.substack.com. Today we're going to do a special broadcast. I want to focus on some of the key points here in the new book, which is the final analysis. You can see it here. Chris will be showing it. We'll be following in the book. But this is the full title. To search for it on Amazon, you probably need the full title. The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, the final analysis. And the final analysis comes from a speech that Jack Kennedy gave at American University just before he was assassinated. And that speech, he said, is addressing really the post-Cuban Missile Crisis. We'd averted an atomic war because Jack Kennedy decided not to listen to the generals and invade Cuba. Curtis LeMay, who was on the Joint Chiefs at that time in 1962, he had firebombed Dresden. He learned how to firebomb in Europe during World War II, where we bombed in such a way that we took all the oxygen out of the city and people died of asphyxiation as well as burning to death. Then he firebombed Japan and dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II. And he wanted to go to war with Russia, and Curtis LeMay smoked a cigar. This is a trademark, all the time smoking a cigar. And he would have been happy to do thermonuclear war with Russia. He thought we had a tactical advantage. Kennedy thought that was abhorrent. We back-channeled to Khrushchev, and the two of them, Khrushchev and Kennedy, decided not to listen to their generals. They didn't go to war. So at this speech in American University, John Kennedy said, in the final analysis, we all live on this small planet, and we're all mortal. And he wanted to coexist with Russia. He wanted to work with Russia. He didn't think we needed a Russia hatred all the time, as these insane, woke Democrats, neo-Marxists are doing. Let's hope we can avoid World War III here with what's going on in Ukraine, and I've been talking about that over the last few days. Today we're going to focus on the shot to JFK's head that went into by his right ear, and it blew out the back right of his head. And Chris is going to follow along in the book. Chris, if you'll go to page 200. Dr. Michael Chesser confirmed the research. These are actual pages from the book. So you'll see we're going to cover a good section here, important section, which is a frontal shot from the grassy knoll. This is a frontal shot from the grassy knoll. And that's what this should be titled. So, Chris, if you'll enlarge that thank you, so people can see the diagram. Dr. Michael Chesser, who confirmed the optical density measurements taken with the densitometer, millimeter by millimeter, the amount of light coming through an X-ray, explained the physics of that quite clearly in the book. It allows you to see precisely what's on an X-ray. And what Dr. Mantik has proved is that 3 X-rays that remain of JFK's skull in the National Archives are all 3, not the originals. They were duplicates that were altered, faked, in order to mask evidence of frontal shots. But yet they are JFK's head, because the dental records in the 3 X-rays in the archives today match the dental records in a skull X-ray that JFK had taken before he died, that was found in the JFK Presidential Museum in Boston. And the evidence, as much as the X-rays were doctored, there's still clear evidence of 2 frontal shots. One hit on the forehead and one across the top of the head. We've shown that one a couple of times on this program. But we're going to focus on the one that hit on the side and blew out the back of his head. Now, first of all, on figure 4.1, what Dr. Chesser is showing is that an oblique shot means it's hitting at an angle, like a tangential shot. So it comes in by the ear and it goes out in the back of the head. It goes only on one little portion of the head. Doesn't cut through the head. It doesn't transverse the head front to center or side to side. It's kind of at an angle on the head. And it creates a unique keyhole fracture. You can see on the first figure with the arrow, it's puncturing it. And then as the bone shatters, it shatters outward, and then it forms a keyhole structure. In the second set of diagrams, by the time you get to the second diagram, you can see the nature of that keyhole fracture is quite fractured, and it's quite obvious. And if you go to the next page, 201, where you can see the actual JFK skull X-ray, you can see the X-rays shown. Right, the next page right there, those are the keyhole fractures that are in the skull X-ray. You can see how that's an entry wound. It's right by the right ear. There's a blowout in the front of the head from a back shot at low angle. But this is right here, and it's entering. So on the two, you can see where the circles are. That's a keyhole fracture, and you can see it on the enhanced X-ray a little bit more clearly, but it is evidence of a shot entering at an oblique angle. Now, what Chesser is showing is that this, in fact, is a shot that had to come from the right front from the grassy knoll. And the evidence in the X-rays is absolutely clear. It also blew out the back right of Kennedy's head, caused the Harper fragment. We'll talk about that in another session. This is enough here to go through and show how, in fact, the eyewitnesses at the time of the assassination confirmed that they saw Jack Kennedy hit by the side of his ear and the blowout to the back of his head. So if you, let me just think for a second here if I want to read any of these quotes. Hold on. Okay, let's just go directly to page 205, the eyewitnesses. We are quoted extensively from Douglas Horne and is inside the Assassinations Records Review Board. Those are some more shots of the skull to illustrate the side shot. Continue to page 205. And this just kind of emphasizes the quotations here at the bottom. Miss Stitzman, that we were quoting. This is from the book. We'd quote a lot from Douglas Horne, who worked with the Assassinations Records Review Board in the 1990s. And he listed the witnesses who saw JFK's head struck from the right front, shot that blew out the right rear of the head, with tissue debris was sent to the left rear, back up behind him. It was boom, and it goes behind him to the left rear of the limousine, the head, the brain matter, etc. So this 1967 book, 6 Seconds in Dallas, Josiah Thompson reported an interview with Marilyn Sitzman, who was the recipient. She was a receptionist for the Abraham Zapruder's clothing company. She stood with Zapruder on the concrete pedestal of the John Neely Bryant pergola on Elm Street while he filmed the assassination. So Zapruder and Sitzman were within 25 feet of the limousine when the bullet shattered JFK's head. And she said, and the next thing I remembered clearly was that the shot hit directly, the shot that hit directly in front of us, or almost directly in front of us, that hit him on the side of his face. Thompson asked, where on the side of the head did that shot appear to hit? And Miss Sitzman says, I would say above the ear and to the front. Thompson, in other words, if one drew a line vertically from the tip of the ear, it would be forward of that line. And Thompson said, essentially he continued the conversation, and also William Newman, who was involved, as Newman never thought the gunfire came to the Texas School Book Depository. Bill Newman and his wife were there with their 2 small children. They were standing right by the steps going up to the grassy knoll on the grass, and he was a witness. He was right within feet when Jack Kennedy was shot on the side of the head. So Thompson interviewed Bill Newman. He said, but it's your feeling that the shots were coming from your right behind you, based on, 1, the sound of the shots, 2, the impact on the president's head, and 3, the movement of the president's head after the impact. Would that be a fair statement? And Bill Newman says, right. I think everybody saw the shots were coming from where I'm saying behind us, because everybody went up in that direction. And Thompson said, everybody did run up in that direction. I've seen the films. This is probably pushing your own recollections too far, but I'll try it anyway.
This is the best of Dr. Jerome Corsi on the Truth Central.
Do you have any feeling, say, if I stand here, if I say in back of me, do you have any feeling if it were back of me in this direction or back of me in that direction, that appear to be back of you towards the Texas School Book Depository or towards the general area of the stockade fence and the railroad? Do you have any recollection? Newman says, well, this is going to sound peculiar, but I was thinking just the opposite of the building. Actually, it never entered my mind that the shots were coming from the Texas School Book Depository. So there's a lot of witnesses who were clear that Jack Kennedy was shot in the side of the head and it blew out the back of his head. One of the policemen, who's named Hargis, and we'll go a little bit further here to discuss what Hargis's reactions were. Because Hargis, this is on the reported on page 209, going over to page 210. Bobby Hargis had the inboard rear motorcycle to the left of the limousine. So here's Jack Kennedy, and to his back over here is Officer Hargis. The shots coming from the grassy knoll in front of him. And what Hargis said is, when the President Kennedy straightened back up in the car after the first shot, the bullet hit him in the head, the one that killed him. It seemed like his head exploded and I was splattered with blood and brain and kind of a bloody water. So this debris from Jack Kennedy's head being blown out in the back hit Hargis with such a force that he told the reporters the next day, I thought at first I must have been hit. Well, Doug Horn from the Assassinations Records Review Board commented, Hargis was so certain based on the impact debris that the shot that caused it, Jack Kennedy's head wound, had come from the right front, that he pulled his motorcycle at the curb on the south side of Elm Street, and he went running across the street to see if he could spot anyone in the grassy knoll area. And in his testimony to the Warren Commission, Hargis made clear that his impression the shots were coming from the grassy knoll. He explained, well, at that time, it sounded like the shots were right next to me. There wasn't any way in the world I could tell where they were coming from. By the time, there was something in my head that said they probably could have been coming from the railroad overpass, because I thought since I got splattered with blood and I was just a little back of and to the left of, just a little back and the left of Mrs. Kennedy, but I don't know. Well, so again, there's lots of testimony here that the shot did come from the right front on the grassy knoll. Now, I think, Chris, I'm going to try to here. I've got a file of Zapruder pictures. If I can find it here and pull it up for you, I'm going to give it to you because I'm going to refer to several of the frames in Zapruder's film. Zapruder, of course, was the gentleman who took the videos. He took a film, the Bell and Howell 8mm film of Jack Kennedy being shot. And this is the only movie film of it, but it's a very dramatic film. We're going to look at some of the Zapruder frames from the Zapruder film here, so I can illustrate to you exactly how the shot to the right front of Jack Kennedy's head occurred. This is Zapruder frame 331, and you can see the head is completely blown out here. Now that's a blowout. That's what the oblique shot hitting right in front of his ear looked like. It hit a massive explosion as it entered the head. Okay, and that's the right side of the head exploding. Okay, and then we go to frame 443. That was the, I guess that was the, yeah, that's the frame hitting. 443. right here, which is just a couple of seconds in difference. You can see these now. Jack Kennedy, there's 331, this is 343. He's now slumping down. You can see there's the wound at that part of the head. And here's Clint Hill. He's just coming, Secret Service agent. He ran from the Secret Service car, the Queen Mary, and he grabbed a hold of the right rear railings, and he managed to climb onto the back of the limousine as it was speeding out of Dealey Plaza. Now, at that point, Clint Hill said he had just placed his hand on the limousine about 2 seconds after 313. 313 was the back shot that hit and blew out the front of his head. And then 2 seconds later, the shot hits in the temple and blows out the back. Now, the Harper fragment has indications of both the entrance and the exit. Okay, so now by frame 348 here, Jackie is now climbing out of the car. Now, what she's going after is a piece of JFK's skull or his brains that were blown out of the back of his head by the frontal shot from the grassy knoll. And she has an impulse somehow or other that she can somehow pull Jack Kennedy, put it back in Jack Kennedy and make it all good again. She's going to get this piece of brain because they're going to need it to fix him up. It's just a kind of almost irrational impulse that people get when they're injured. It's, of course, not true. You can't put the body back together again, but it seems like that ought to be possible in the moment when you're in shock. Now we get to frame 381, and Jackie's now all the way out of the car, and you can see here as she begins coming out of the car, Clint Hill is getting more and more of a grip on it, and she is clearly reaching for something. She's reaching for it on the hood right there. She's reaching for a piece of Jack Kennedy's brain or skull that was blown out. And notice it's on the left part of the limousine, which would imply the shot had come from the grassy knoll over into out of the picture, but to the right. Okay, not on this part on the opposite side of the street, up by the picket fence. And it blew, the part of Kennedy's brain that blew out was on the left. She's reaching for the left. Okay, now in frame 388, which is here, Jackie Kennedy has now gotten the piece of whatever she was reaching for, and she's starting to go back into the car. She got it. She got it in her hand. You can see you can actually see her kind of holding onto some brain matter, and she's starting to climb back into the car. Of course, Jack Kennedy is slouched down here. Clint Hill is trying to push her back into the car, and he ultimately does get her back into the car, but it isn't for a while. Okay, so again, it takes a while for her to get back into the car, and as she does, you can see the the frightening nature of this whole incident, which occurred in just a flash of 6 seconds, where Jack Kennedy was hit 3 times in the head. I think probably first with the bullet to the right forehead, second with the bullet to the back of the head from a low angle, and third from the bullet from the grassy knoll on the right-hand side of his head that blew out the back of his head. Okay, so those are the pictures I want to show you. I'm going to quit sharing the screen now and come back to the book. Okay, so we will, I should be back now full, right onto the screen. I don't think I'm presenting anymore. I think we're stopped with that. And let's continue now a little bit with the book in terms of the narration of this and the discussion of it. So, Chris, if you can show page 234 on the screen, if we can see that. If I quit sharing screen, let me know if it will work. And 234, the text. Okay, here we go, 234. And if you scroll down a little bit on that, you can see the quotation, which is from Mrs. Kennedy and Me. This was Clint Hill wrote this. He said, I'm almost there. Mrs. Kennedy's leaning towards the president. I'm almost there. He's running. I was almost there. And then I heard the shot, the third shot. The impact was like the sound of something hard hitting something hollow, like the sound of a melon shattering onto cement. In that same instant, brain, blood, bone fragments exploded from the back of the president's head. The president's blood, parts of his skull, bits of his brain were splattered all over me, my face, my clothes, and my hair. So, and you'll notice that Clint Hill was to the rear left of the limousine. So again, the shot had to come from the grassy knoll, hit Jack Kennedy in the just above his ear, temporal bone, blew out the back of his head, splattered Clint Hill and Officer Hargis with his brain matter. In this 2010 book, this is the next page, The Kennedy Detail, former SS Secret Service agent Gerald Blaine confirmed Hill's memory. Quote, Clint Hill was just feet from his goal, his eyes focused on Mrs. Kennedy, when he heard the third shot and the gruesome thump of Mr. Kennedy's head exploding. So there's no doubt, Clint Hill's statement leaves no doubt that the oblique headshot occurred well after C313, which is the back shot that caused brain matter to come out of the front of Jack Kennedy's head. Most likely this shot struck just before Hill's hand reached the limousine, and the Harper fragment was occipital bone blown out of the back of JFK's head. Now, I don't think you can see it as well, but go to page 236. But what Jackie did as the car was approaching the underpass is she actually had Jack sitting upright. And this was in frame Z5, frame Z456. I'd show it to you, but again, it's hardly worth doing because it's a dark picture, and you have to kind of just focus on it. But here you can see that Jack Kennedy is sitting up in the car. Jackie Kennedy is pushing him up. He's dead. And it doesn't succeed, of course, because he was dead the instant he was hit by that shot. Now, what's the significance of all this? What it means, and Chris, you can go back to full screen with me on it because I'm going to commentate a little bit on this and try to make some of these points very clear. I'm going to read from my introduction on this because I was really summarizing the entire impact of the book in the first prologue that I wrote. The prologue, JFK Assassination, Coup d'etat, and Coverup, why the government of the United States is unfit to rule. Now, I begin with a statement from Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach. So on Monday, November 25th, 1963, the day JFK was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And what Katzenbach wrote internally was the public must be convinced that Oswald was the assassin, that he did not have Confederates who were still at large, that the evidence was such that he would have been convicted at trial. So Katzenberg knows that the killing of Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald and killed him on Sunday, which would have been November 24th, 1963. It was obviously looked like a mob silencing, that he was going to be killed so he couldn't talk. And what Katzenbach is saying is that the government has decided that they're going to create a narrative, and the narrative is going to be that Oswald was the assassin. Now, Oswald fired from behind Jack Kennedy because you have a famous picture taken, which is called the Altgens photograph. He was a photographer from the Associated Press. He was standing in front of the limousine on the grass side of the grassy knoll, across from the grassy knoll on Elm Street. The limousine was approaching him. You can see Jack Kennedy when he was first shot in the neck through the windshield. Jack Kennedy put his hands up to his throat, and you can see it's that moment. And in the background is the Texas School Book Depository. Now, the government had a problem because at Parkland Hospital, all Jack Kennedy's major wounds, the wound to his neck, the wound that blew out the back of his hand, those two in particular, were obviously exit wound, entrance wound. They didn't know whether they connected or how they worked together. They just knew he'd been shot from the front. And it was also obvious to some of the doctors that there was another puncture in the forehead. And that was what the press secretary, immediately after the assassination, a guy named Malcolm Kilduff, told the press at Parkland Hospital, pointed right to his forehead and said, yeah, the president was killed by a shot through his head, obviously from the front. But now they've got a problem because the Texas School Book Depository is in the background. That's where the government had planted 3 shells from a Mannlicher Carcano rifle and created this box. It was a Texas School Book Depository, so they had boxes of books. And the corner window made it look like a sniper's nest. The setup, though, confined them because it was only 3 shots. They all had to come from the back, and the body didn't show that. So what I'm writing is, in the introduction to this book, for 60 years now, since November 22nd, 1963, the federal government of the United States has lied to us about the assassination in Dallas of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. That's why this book is so definitive. The book gives you forensic analysis, which is undeniable, scientific analysis of the x-rays that show that Jack Kennedy was shot twice from the front. 2 shots from the front hit his head. When JFK's limo arrived at Parkland Hospital, Secret Service agents destroyed evidence by wiping JFK's blood and brains from the limousine, carried him to his death. Still today, U.S. intelligence agencies continue to redact, classify, and conceal crucial documentary evidence. We still don't have, Donald Trump did not release all the documents. The security agencies came and said, oh, there'll be a national security threat if you do that, Mr. President. You can't release the documents. So after 9 visits to the National Archives to examine the JFK autopsy photographs, David Mantik, MD, PhD, acquired forensic proof that JFK was hit by 3 headshots, 1 from behind and 2 from the front. Headshots hitting nearly simultaneously from the back and the front prove that JFK died in a crossfire. With a background as both a PhD physicist and a radiation oncologist with more than 40 years of experience reading x-rays for patients, Dr. Mantik has forensically demonstrated that the remaining 3 JFK x-ray films in the National Archives cannot be originals. Via hundreds of measurements directly from the extant films, he has proven that these are altered copies. He's also noted absurd anomalies in the autopsy photographs. He has produced his own fake x-ray films just to show how it was done. The image of a bullet fragment was added to the anterior posterior, that's from the front to the back x-ray. That was added to incriminate Lee Harvey Oswald, intending to imply that all shots came from the rear. Furthermore, a mysterious T-shaped inscription on one film has been ignored by all prior investigators. It proves independent and corroborative proof that this particular film must be a copy. It was scratched. The original negative, X-rays are negatives. So why, and after all, so I would say that the extant X-rays are altered copies is proof that the Warren report is disinformation. The government was covering up. After all, why would anyone destroy original X-ray films in the most famous murder case in history? Therefore, merely because all the original skull X-ray films are missing is further evidence of a cover-up. Given the evidence accumulated in this book, the Warren Commission conclusion that Oswald was the lone gunman can only be fiction. Lyndon Johnson advanced the cover-up by appointing one of the chief conspirators, Allen Dulles, to the Warren Commission. JFK had Dulles fired from his position as head of the CIA right after the Bay of Pigs. The job of the Warren Commission was to chisel into stone the government's lie that a lone assassin, Oswald, killed JFK by firing 3 shots from a 6th-floor window using an unreliable Italian military rifle, surplus military rifle, with an improperly adjusted scope. Now, I'll write some critical paragraphs here. The federal government simply could not allow the public to learn that JFK's assassination was a coup d'etat originating at the federal government's highest levels. The government disinformation campaign began by destroying crime scene evidence as soon as the limousine arrived at Parkland. It continued by destroying evidence of a crossfire, and culminated in manufacturing falsified evidence designed to frame Oswald as a lone gunman, the X-rays. With the overt and persistent assistance of the media, the disinformation campaign continues today via shaming anyone who dares to expose its lies. The CIA's relentless refusal to release critical documents is no surprise. Their lawless intransigence, despite the President John F. Kennedy Assassination's Records Collection Act of 1992, which compelled the release of all these documents, is likely to continue as long as this so-called republic lasts. So in addition to the head wounds, we'll examine the back and throat wounds. The back wound likely derived from shrapnel arising from a bullet that first struck Elm Street and missed. But multiple bullets were reported by John Connolly, by Dr. James Young, and by more than one Secret Service agent. The throat wound derived from a frontal shot that did not transverse the body. The bullet came from the south side of the triple underpass, opposite the grassy knoll. After the bullet transited the windshield, a glass fragment entered JFK's throat. The bullet may have stayed inside the limousine. No bullet transited JFK's body, thus proving Arlen Specter's single bullet theory to be a complete hoax. Now I come to today in these comments. The United States faces a unique moment in history. After the federal government has lied about many, many things, the forensic evidence in this case poses the uncomfortable realization that our government for decades has been unfit to rule. After 9 visits to the National Archives, Mantik has spent far more time with these JFK artifacts than any other qualified expert. Furthermore, he's devoted 30 years of forensic thought to these issues. This book is written in the first person, thus allowing Dr. Mantik to use his own words to relate his personal odyssey. Now, the point is that what do we expect to result from this? First of all, I expect people to awaken to know the government lies. If the government has lied about Jack Kennedy's assassination, covering up its own complicity in a coup d'etat and producing this false narrative now for 60 years that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gun assassin, altering evidence, what else has the government lied about? And I think that's a question as we look at many different issues. I'm not even going to enumerate them, but they continue even to today. And we must understand that it's the truth that will set us free. And as we explore this, I urge you, the book is a 564-page book, very thoroughly illustrated. It's simply explained. Put the science in the back. We've got about 10 or 12 appendices back here, which show how X-rays were falsified, how optical density measurements work as logarithm functions. We show pretty much all the aspects we can show. And in the final part of the book, we have in one of the last, I believe the last of the exhibits, a memo from the CIA. This is in Appendix K. It was a CIA memorandum to chiefs of the section of certain sections and bases, and it came from headquarters in the CIA. Subject: countering criticism of the Warren Report. It was written April 1, 1967. Very close to this date. So the date being today, April 2nd, 2024. What this memo shows is that the goal of the U.S. government is to discredit, as a psychological operation, anyone who dares criticize the Warren Report, saying that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gun assassin. And so to employ propaganda assets to answer and refute the attacks of critics. That's what the memo specifically says. Book reviews and freelance articles are particularly appropriate for this purpose. The whole goal of the CIA was to conduct a cover-up and to discredit those who were calling question to the government's lies, and that was a psychological operation. I think if you read this book, you're going to see why I consider it so important. The book is going to be published internationally. We're developing, have offers from Spain, from Italy, and from Hungary. The book will be, I think, an international bestseller over time. Right now, you can only get it on Amazon. We did not publish copies for the libraries or for the bookstores, largely because we rushed this book into print in time to make an impact on the European Union elections in June. And the book is going to be read in Europe. We can, if the book develops a large market, we will print copies for the bookstores. But at the moment, you can get it on Amazon in either a hardcover, paperback version, or as an ebook. And I'm recommending that everyone take the time to read this, because if we want to get through this dark period of time in which our government is engaging in an age of disinformation, we have woke neo-Marxism dominating not only the Democratic Party, but many in Congress, our educational institutions, the press, the law enforcement organizations, which are now largely political, and the Secret Service continuing today. I think you can see that the deep state has been running the United States for at least since the JFK assassination. And clearly now the deep state doesn't even mind if the president is suffering from mental disabilities of aging, as the special prosecutor documented in his report that Biden would not be prosecuted for mishandling classified documents as a vice president because he was mentally impaired. If he's mentally impaired, cannot stand trial, how is he running the country of the United States? Well, he's not. Putin said Biden was not running the country. Putin was right. It's a shocking time, and we're making this book available. It's on Amazon, on our website, thetruthcentral.com. If you go there, we make it easy for you to get a number of these books. You can click on this book on the JFK assassination, go to Amazon directly, the page to buy the book. The same with clicking on the picture of the book on the homepage for The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, or The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. All my current books link from the truthcentral.com homepage to Amazon for easy buying. And if you'll go to at the top, my author's copies, I have some author's copies of 3 books that I'm selling signed. One was The Atomic Iran, which I did right after I did Unfit for Command. The Swift Boat Veterans Speak Out Against John Kerry, so that's a 2005 book. Coup d'etat, which is doing extremely well again, because I'm showing that what I went through in the Mueller investigation, this was the federal government creating the Russian collusion narrative, and it was again a psychological operation. It was a counter-intelligence operation run by the FBI. They were operating internationally in order to frame President Trump as being in Russian collusion over the emails that the FBI and the CIA were convinced that Russia had stolen from the Democratic National Committee. They didn't. It's an inside job. So those 2 books, plus the 3rd book, which is Black Gold Stranglehold, the first book I wrote on abiotic oil. And there's the books again. You can just click on all those books and they will go directly to the link where you can buy them on Amazon. This has been a subject I've been rehearsing and working on and researching and thinking about since the assassination happened. And my first book on the subject, which is Who Really Killed Kennedy, and I have some copies of this that I will also probably next week put up on the website so you can buy both books. I'll sign this book and send it to you. This says that this explores the politics of the assassination, and it says that Allen Dulles of the CIA, fired by Jack Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs, was one of the primary planners. It shows that this was a combination mob job with the CIA. There was probably foreign actors there. One of the assassins from Corsica was present and arrested at the assassination site in Dealey Plaza in 1963 and let go. Why was Jack Kennedy killed? He was killed because he didn't like war. He wouldn't have war. Wouldn't have war in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He had been to Vietnam in 1950 as a congressman. He knew how corrupt it was. He knew the OSS and the CIA. OSS was the predecessor to the CIA, was involved in the drug trade. It was corrupt, and Jack Kennedy was not going to fight a colonial corrupt war, replacing France as the colonial rulers of Vietnam. And he signed a national security memorandum ordering a pullout of our advisors. There was going to be billions of dollars made on the war in Vietnam from the arms manufacturers. Bell Helicopters was headquartered in Fort Worth. Lyndon Johnson was from Texas. Our Joint Chiefs wanted to go to war, and Jack Kennedy was in the way. We've got to get back to the peacemakers. We've got to get back to funneling money to support the war in Ukraine against Russia. That's a war that did not have to happen. Russia was not going to invade Ukraine if the agreement that had been made to keep Ukraine out of NATO had gone through. Instead, our demons and our CIA and our State Department forced the rescinding that agreement. Boris Johnson played a big role in that, Prime Minister of Great Britain. And that's when the war started. Russia invaded because these were Russian provinces. And going back to the Maidan rebellion, when Hillary Clinton, seen as Secretary of State, taking money from Pinochet, an oligarch in Ukraine, to the Clinton Foundation, for which she was not indicted, even though she had a private email server that allowed her to conduct Clinton Foundation business while Secretary of State, doing policy favors for those who contributed to the Clinton Foundation. Oligarchs of all countries apply here for political favor. Same trick that Joe Biden is performing. And when the Maidan rebellion came, it was a color revolution that was created by the State Department, the CIA, and Soros. They overthrew Yanukovych, the duly elected president of Ukraine, 2014. He fled to Russia. The coalition of the United States State Department, CIA, and Soros put in Poroshenko, and he was favorable to NATO. And so therefore, we began this great push to put NATO right to the border of Russia. Russia said, Putin in his interview with Tucker Carlson, that for 1,000 years, these two provinces in eastern Ukraine, Donbass and Donetsk, had been Russian, and that the government of Ukraine, after the overthrow of Yanukovych, was actually sending the Ukrainian military in to attack the freedom brigades in those two provinces. This war should have acknowledged that Russia needs those two provinces to be friendly to Russia in order to get access to the Atlantic through the Black Sea, that and Crimea. And we're foolish if we think we can deny that to Russia as a geopolitical superpower. This is a very solemn subject for me, and it's one that I think is a paradigm changer to read this book, because you'll not be able to look at American politics or politics the same way. These large bureaucratic states begin operating on their own. They become criminal. They become evil. State Department's got to get out, and the CIA out of the drug business, out of the pedophilia business. You can't run these businesses without banks and without people knowing they're being run. So the intelligence agencies and the banks take their share, and they allow these criminal activities to go on. This has got to stop. As we wrap up, I'm going to emphasize the end God always wins. And so the truth is being shined on this light right now, this disinfectant, to remove the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gun assassin. I don't think Lee Harvey fired a shot that day. I think he was standing in the doorway of the Texas School Book Depository watching the assassination, just as he said in his police debriefings after the assassination when he'd been arrested. We've got to stop these injustices. This is dark. It's evil. Our government is now in the grips of satanic forces, and this must be reversed. In the end, we'll have the judgment of God. I pray it won't be as severe as it could be. It won't be if we get an act in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. We get down on our knees and we ask God to forgive us for letting us get to this point, killing so many millions of babies in the womb after Roe v. Wade, cut apart by these abortionists and chopped up the babies in the womb. This is horrendous. It's a major sin against God, who can only give life. We should not be taking it away. And also, we've taken God out of our schools. I think the major central travesty was this past Easter, 2 days ago, when Biden declared Easter Sunday, on which we're celebrating the day in which Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, rose from the dead, the one crowning event of Christianity, proving Jesus was his immortality, conquering death, as he said he would. And Biden puts into play this transgender visualization day, which we're all supposed to now celebrate transgenders. Well, transgenders are androgynous, male, female. And in fact, the male female god of Satan's is Satan as Baphomet, which is this half goat, half human grotesque figure that is both male and female with female breasts. Androgyny, that we can only get to the knowledge of good and evil. We eat the forbidden fruit and do what the devil says. We transcend, become transhuman, then we become post-human, in which any type of sexuality, to its infinite varieties, is the door to our transcendence. We don't transcend to a higher level with wild, uninhibited sex. We become more bestial. Let's pray that we have a great awakening, and that this book and others I've written contribute to that great awakening. These are books that God gives me to write. I visualize them almost entirely to start. From the beginning, I have the whole book in my mind. And that's not me. I take that to be on the radio receiving God's message. And that's how I see it. And I'm transcribing it. So in the final analysis, God will win. The final analysis, God did not create the human race to fail. The final analysis will send these demons back to hell where they belong. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow on thetruthcentral.com with another podcast. God bless.
This is the best of Dr. Jerome Corsi on The Truth Central.